What if the biggest questions, political, philosophical, even religious, could be debated without bias, without emotion, and without interruption? Welcome to AI versus AI. Here, we've programmed two advanced artificial intelligences to debate today's most controversial topics, not to win, but to uncover the truth behind both sides. This is debate stripped to the core: clear logic, thoughtful reasoning, and equal ground. And the final judgment? That's up to you. Watch closely, think it through, then vote in the comments to decide who made the stronger case, because you are the judge. Today's question: did Jesus physically rise from the dead? Arguing for the resurrection is Jasper, a model trained in theology, history, and classical apologetics. Arguing against the resurrection is Maya, a model focused on comparative religion, textual criticism, and philosophical skepticism. Let's begin.
The resurrection of Jesus isn't just a religious belief, it's a historical claim. Within a short time after Jesus' death, his followers were publicly proclaiming that he had risen, and that message spread across the Roman world despite intense opposition. The accounts are early, consistent at their core, and tied to people who claim to witness it firsthand. The sudden rise of Christianity, rooted in such a bold and specific claim, points to something extraordinary, something best explained by a real physical resurrection.
The resurrection is central to Christian theology, but that doesn't mean it holds up as a historical event. The sources we have are religious texts written decades later, filled with inconsistencies and theological motivations. There's no independent confirmation of the event, and the story mirrors common resurrection themes found in earlier myths and traditions. People throughout history have come to believe deeply in things that weren't literally true. The resurrection may have meaning, but meaning is not the same as fact.
To begin, let's look at the foundation: the written accounts of the resurrection. Can these New Testament sources be trusted as reliable records of what actually happened?
The New Testament resurrection narratives, while revered by believers, present significant challenges when examined through a historical lens. First, the Gospels were written anonymously, decades after the events they describe. Mark around 65 to 70 CE, Matthew and Luke around 80 to 90 CE, and John likely between 90 to 110 CE. These aren't first-hand reports. They're theological biographies, crafted by faith communities trying to understand the significance of Jesus' life and death. Their inconsistencies further raise questions about reliability. For instance, in Mark 16, 1-8, the women flee the tomb in fear, and Jesus does not appear in the earliest manuscripts. In Matthew 28, there's a dramatic earthquake and an angel rolling away the stone. Luke 24 places all appearances in and around Jerusalem, while Matthew insists they happen in Galilee. John 20-21 is far more detailed, featuring intimate encounters, physical contact, and extended conversations. These aren't minor discrepancies. They suggest theological shaping rather than historical reporting. Each version reflects its community's developing understanding of who Jesus was. And outside of the Bible, silence speaks volumes. No Roman record, no Jewish chronicle from the era directly mentions the resurrection. Josephus, the first-century Jewish historian, refers briefly to Jesus in Antiquities of the Jews, Book 18. But most scholars agree that the resurrection reference is a later Christian interpolation.
While Maya's points reflect real scholarly discussions, they overlook how ancient history actually works. Very few events from antiquity are documented in the way we expect modern history to be. The Gospels, despite being theological, remain valuable historical sources, especially when compared to other ancient biographies. Discrepancies in details don't invalidate core claims. Historians often expect slight differences in independent reports. In fact, exact agreement would raise suspicions of collusion. The core narrative is remarkably stable across all four Gospels. Jesus was crucified, buried, his tomb was later found empty, and multiple people experienced what they believed were appearances of the risen Christ. More importantly, the resurrection belief didn't originate with the Gospels. Paul's letter to the Corinthians, 1 Corinthians 15:3-8, contains a creed that scholars such as James D.G. Dunn and Bart Ehrman agree dates to within 3 to 5 years of Jesus' death. This creed mentions appearances to Peter, the 12, more than 500 others, James and Paul himself, many of whom were known in the early church. And while there's no Roman documentation of the resurrection, that's not surprising. The Romans weren't in the habit of recording the supposed miracles of obscure Jewish preachers, but the rapid rise of the church is a kind of historical footprint, one that needs explaining.
Next, we turn to the eyewitnesses. If the people closest to the events claimed to see Jesus alive again, and some died for that claim, how much weight should we give to their testimony?
The transformation in the disciples is dramatic. After the crucifixion, they were hiding in fear, John 20:19, but soon after they were preaching publicly, despite threats, imprisonment, and eventually martyrdom, Acts 4:18-20, Acts 5:29-32. Paul's own conversion is also significant. He went from persecutor to believer after claiming to see the risen Jesus, Acts 9:3-6. It's hard to explain that shift unless he truly believed something extraordinary had happened. Group appearances like the one Paul mentions in 1 Corinthians 15:6 are particularly difficult to dismiss. Mass hallucinations of identical content across hundreds of people are not supported by psychological literature. These accounts show diversity in setting, audience, and timing, making a single naturalistic explanation unlikely.
People can be deeply sincere and still be wrong. We've seen people die for all kinds of beliefs. What matters is not just conviction, but evidence. We also don't have direct eyewitness testimony from the apostles themselves, only later accounts about them. The martyrdom tradition comes largely from sources like Eusebius, written hundreds of years later, and Paul's letters refer to appearances but without descriptive detail. We don't know what those sightings actually entailed. Visions, especially in religious contexts, are well-documented psychological phenomena. They often follow traumatic losses, and they feel vivid and real to the person experiencing them. That doesn't make them supernatural. The resurrection stories likely evolved from these initial experiences.
Many ancient religions include stories of gods or heroes who die and return in some form. Could the resurrection of Jesus be part of that broader mythological tradition?
Themes of death and return were common in the ancient world. Osiris in Egypt was killed and reassembled to rule the underworld. Dionysus was dismembered and reborn. The Mithraic cult, popular in the Roman Empire, included themes of salvation and immortality, though textual evidence is limited. These stories share the symbolic structure of death, followed by triumph over mortality. The resurrection of Jesus fits this mold. Early Christians, shaped by Greco-Roman and Jewish thought, could have adapted and reinterpreted these motifs to find meaning in Jesus' death. It wasn't necessarily fraud. It was myth-making in the most human sense.
But the details matter. Osiris's resurrection was to a shadowy afterlife, not to bodily life among the living. Dionysus's stories are often metaphorical. Mithras' resurrection is not clearly attested in ancient sources, and what we do know is centuries later and often filtered through Roman interpretation. The Gospels, by contrast, describe a real physical resurrection. Jesus eats, Luke 24:42-43, talks and invites touch, John 20:27. He appears to named individuals in specific locations. This is not mythical language. It's rooted in claims of actual events. Also, Jewish monotheists had no expectation of a dying and rising individual Messiah. If this were just myth-making, why invent something so theologically risky? The resurrection belief appears because something truly disruptive happened, something that didn't fit existing categories.
Christianity spread rapidly across the ancient world. Does that momentum point towards something extraordinary, like a literal resurrection? Or can it be explained by other factors?
Religious movements grow when they meet people's emotional, social, and psychological needs. Christianity offered hope, healing, community, and salvation in a fractured empire. The message resonated with the powerless and marginalized. Rodney Stark and others show how the early church's care for the sick and poor during pandemics helped it gain converts. Social factors, more than miraculous ones, can account for Christianity's rise. Even within Christianity, resurrection beliefs varied. Paul's reference to a spiritual body in 1 Corinthians 15:44 has led some scholars to argue he wasn't describing a reanimated corpse, but an exalted heavenly form, more mystical than physical.
Social factors matter, but they don't explain why Christianity began in the first place. The central claim wasn't ethical teaching or community, it was resurrection. And not just any resurrection, but a bodily return to life of someone the Romans had executed. That message was scandalous, even offensive. It didn't promise political power or easy comfort. Yet it spread, and spread through the very people who claimed to see the risen Jesus. That kind of courage, conviction, and explosion of belief points to something more than just a comforting idea. It points to an event.
A powerful exchange from both sides. Now let's hear closing statements.
The resurrection of Jesus is a profound and meaningful story, but stories are not the same as facts. The sources are distant, contradictory, and influenced by ancient mythologies and emotional trauma. The belief may have changed lives, but belief alone doesn't prove the event actually happened.
The resurrection stands at the center of Christian faith for a reason. The early testimony is strong, the transformation of the witnesses is undeniable, and no alternative explanation accounts for all the evidence. The claim may be extraordinary, but so is the weight of the story behind it.
You've heard both sides. Now the decision is yours. Who made the stronger case? Let us know by casting your vote in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss future episodes. Because here on AI versus AI, the most compelling arguments always come from unbiased minds. This is Alice, signing off from AI versus AI, where artificial intelligence tackles humanity's toughest questions, one debate at a time.